Minkah Fitzpatrick and the Steelers secondary are going to be a big part of this team's future. We got good quotes from Minkah Fitzpatrick and Damontae, Kazee, the new safety that they signed, talking about the secondary. But to talk about it with me, I've got Arthur Moats, former Steelers linebacker, right here on this show. We'll talk about those guys. Devin Bush, Brian Flores talking about Devin Bush on the radio. We'll get to those comments and what he thinks of Kenny Pickett so far. I'm Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, hit the like button on this video. If you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content whenever we got it for you. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day. Joining me today, as I said before, Arthur Moats, a.k.a. The Body. You hear him on
Let's go.
You hear him on Steelers Nation Radio. You hear him on Moats and Deeks. He's here, he's there, he's everywhere, as our friend Wes Euler would often say. Moats, how you doing, man?
Man, I'm feeling great, man. First off, it's always great to see you. We got a chance to link up in person. Was that a week ago? That was a ton of fun right there, man. Always good to be back with you. But more importantly, man, anytime we get to talk a little Steelers, boy, you know I'm always looking forward to that.
Absolutely. I am too. It's a lot of fun talking ball with you. And let's talk some defense. I know that's your preferred side of the football there.
Let's go. Let's go.
One thing that I've been excited to see this year is a more complex and versatile secondary, and not specifically the cornerbacks, but especially the safeties, because we know about Minkah Fitzpatrick and Terrell Edmunds. They have their chemistry. They're good to go. You're confident with them, especially, and that's why they brought Edmunds back. But also, you have to be excited about what you've seen with Damontae, Kazee in camp, and he seems like a guy who not only makes turnovers, but he can tackle the ball carrier. That's been a struggle with his past, but he can tackle the ball carrier. And then we also see Trey Norwood making plays in the preseason game, breaking up passes over the middle, playing in the run stopping game. That has been very interesting to me, and it has me thinking Terrell Austin, former DB coach for the Steelers, he has something cooking for this secondary. Moats, do you think that this is going to be, am I overshooting this here, or is there really something extra, some extra pepper, some extra sauce that we're about to see from this secondary that's going to make this defense a little different?
Now, don't you get up here talking peppers and sauce. You're going to have me thinking food. I'm getting hungry over here, all right? But no, I think you're spot on with that, man. When you talk about that trio of players you just named, Minkah Fitzpatrick, or excuse me, the quartet, because I totally forgot about Trey Norwood as well, man. But Damontae, Kazee, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Trey Norwood, and Terrell Edmunds, all four of those guys have made plays in the NFL. Minkah Fitzpatrick, all-pro safety, one of the elite in the NFL. Edmunds, good player, productive player in his own right. And Damontae Kazee, I mean, this is a dude that led the league in interceptions, was at 3-4 years ago. So he's not too far removed from being a player in his own right. And we feel very excited about what Trey Norwood has been doing, not just from what he did last year, but the camp that he is putting on right now.
Yep.
You saw what he did on Saturday, but for us that have been privileged enough to be out there for some of these practices, that's how he looks in practice. He's flying around. The only problem he has here is that you have a Terrell Edmunds and a Minkah Fitzpatrick and a Damontae Kazee in front of you. If he's anywhere else and is not those caliber guys, he's probably really competing for a starting spot somewhere. So when you're Terrell Austin, you're chomping at the bit when you can think about the safety position and you have this versatile group of guys that are rangy, guys that are fast, and guys that are not afraid to be physical, more importantly.
Yes.
And when you talk about Minkah Fitzpatrick, look at the growth that he's taken. Last year was a huge step in the right direction with his tackling, and not just being a hitter, but being a guy that actually wraps up and brings defenders to the ground. We know Terrell Edmunds, that's his calling card.
Yep.
And based on what Damontae Kazee showed on Saturday, well, we see with him that he's not afraid to be physical. Even if he is a little bit lighter, he still is not afraid to go up there and put his face in the fan, as we like to say with the Steelers. So I definitely have been enjoying all those dudes. And Trey Norwood, to me, I think that this dude can be special if he continues developing the way that he is, because you see how he has just a natural nose for that ball. And you either have that or you don't. But if you're Terrell Austin, you're looking at these guys, you got to be feeling extremely comfortable with that particular unit right there.
You do. And one thing, Trey Norwood's also developed more of a nose to get and put his face in the fan there. I even asked him a few times, like, you're making a lot of plays up in the run game. And he's like, that's what I've been working on all off season. But let's hear from Minkah Fitzpatrick, because he spoke on Wednesday after practice, and he was asked about, the transition from being like a high interception playmaker to a high tackler and changing between those roles. Here's Minkah Fitzpatrick at St. Vincent College just on Wednesday.
You kind of had more time to let the contract sink in.
It's definitely an honor. Pittsburgh is a great city to play for, play in. I'm blessed. I'm honored, like I said. And we're just going to keep working, keep getting better every single year, every single day.
What does it mean to you also to have the ability to, last year you were just making a lot of tackles, and then the year before you got to play more back. What does that say to you about just your versatility and your willingness to just do whatever the team needs to win and not blink and just go out there and do whatever it takes?
Yeah, I think that's the type of player that I am. I'm going to go out there and do whatever Coach T asked me to do, whatever the team needs me to do in order to win. So last year it was making a lot of tackles, and the year before that it was getting a lot of turnovers. Whatever this year brings, this year brings.
Awesome. Thank you.
We were talking to TA yesterday. He was saying he was up in the booth for Saturday night, but he might come down to the field.
Who was that?
The TA.
Yeah.
He might try it out on the field the way Butts did this weekend. As a player, do you have a preference for where your DC is that makes, is there something that makes communication easier? Is it a motivation thing?
There's no difference for real, because all the communication is real clear. Anything that he sees, he's going to communicate down to the field. And if he has to talk to somebody directly, he just place the headsets on. So it's no, I have no preference for real. I know he's done it most of the time that he's DC. He's been up in the box, so whatever's more comfortable for him is what we'll go with.
Minkah, sorry if you've been asked, is there a plan for you to be involved with communication with the Green Dot, or is that going to be a linebacker again? Have you guys figured that out at this point?
You usually keep it with the linebacker, so I think that's what it is.
Do you think that's Miles at this point? Is that probably who's going to wear it?
I think all three of the guys rotating with the ones that got it on right now.
Thanks, Minkah.
Yeah.
So, Moats, when you hear Minkah talking about that and talking about the versatility and just taking on whatever challenge is thrown his way, I thought, for one, Minkah Fitzpatrick, I think he had the most tackles of a defensive back in Steelers history last year. That says to me a lot that, like, hey, this guy is ready to take those steps forward.
No, without a doubt. We knew what he could do in terms of generating turnovers. We know what he brings to the table when you talk about his coverage element. His pre-snap disguises. One of the plays that I still love from him is the pick 6 against the Browns, where he's, showing one thing pre-snap and then he jumps a quick slant, takes to the house, man. So it's things like that we know what he's capable of. But the physicality, that's the part where you can continue to see tangible growth, not just hitting, but wrapping up, driving his feet, playing with the nastiness. That's some of the things that we really started to see last year. And it's that type of mentality, it's that type of intensity that's contagious. When you see your all-pro, formerly highest paid safety in the NFL, I had to throw the former in. Shout out to
Derwin James just jumped in.
Jeez.
Again, a big reason why Omar Khan deserves a lot of points for that deal. Getting Minkah the money then, he beat Jesse Bates, which put the Bengals in a tough situation with him and why he's not practicing with them now. And had they waited, say they were still doing what they were doing with TJ Watt last year, Derwin James would have made them pay even more money. So brilliant move on their part.
100%. But when you see that caliber player being one of the leaders of your defense in terms of physicality, in terms of not making business decisions, in terms of saying, hey, man, I'll put my shoulder on the line for you guys because y'all are worth it to me. That's the type of stuff that, man, when you're out there playing with him, you get excited about that. That means something to you. And I also love the fact that for him, when they're like, hey, man, you might have Terrell Austin up in the booth. How does that feel to you? For him, he's like, it doesn't matter because he's going to be who he is. I know for me, I'm selfish. I like to see my coach. I like to be able to run over to him and feel some energy back and forth.
There you go.
So I didn't want my coach up there in the booth. When he was up there, I kind of felt like my mom wasn't at the house. My dad wasn't there. It's like, cool, but everybody else's parents is home. Where my parents at, So that's kind of my energy with that. But salute Minkah, man, because he's just one of those guys that when you talk about that type of talent with that type of work ethic and that type of humility, you heard what he said. If what this year entails is me leading the team in terms of being a tackler, great. If it's me generating turnovers, great. But whatever it is, that's ultimately what I'm going to give this team. You don't get that all the time with your superstars.
You don't.
That's not something you can take for granted, where you got a guy who's like, hey, even if publicly they're going to talk bad about me for not having all these splash plays, I'm still going to do this because I know this is what the team needs.
Absolutely. I want to talk more about the secondary before we switch topics, but we got to take a quick break to talk to our friends at LinkedIn. We want to talk about LinkedIn because as you're gearing up for the fall, you need the right people on your team to help your small business fire on all cylinders. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job and the purple hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. And did you know every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter. He's Arthur Moats. Moats, we talked about the versatility of the secondary, not just of Minkah Fitzpatrick from across the board, so I'd be remiss if we didn't also hear from another member of the secondary. Here's Damontae Kazee. Granted, I took this video with him in a one-on-one from a couple weeks ago, but still, you could see early on in practice the impact he was making. Here's Damontae Kazee talking about that impact and what the Steelers are trying to do with the secondary as a whole.
Austin was last year their DB's coach. Now he's the defensive coordinator. How much has he talked to you about a role helping with flexibility? Because really, Minkah's been their only deep option, but you're a guy with a lot of deep ball safety experience.
Yeah, so right now, it's just like, he's teaching me everything. And, they ran their system like I ran them, the past 5 years of my life, Mink used to always be back, T used to be down, so now we just switching it up, and now I'm getting a role at strong safety too, playing the box, learning my run fits and everything, so I'm enjoying it.
Who are your sweet mates right now?
My sweet mates?
Yeah.
I don't know, they all cool to me, so I like all of them, man. They bring me energy.
Who you living with?
Art.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Is there and like nobody's pranking each other up in there?
So I've been on Art and Cam since before we got drafted. So
that's
we
cool.
still all train together in Florida. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. So how you've had some time in pads. How eager you're like, hey, the defense, we've been doing this together a while. We're ready to play somebody else now.
You still got to work on things. It's still little stuff we got to work on. Even myself, I got a lot of things to work on. I'm still adjusting with everything, adjusting with the defense. So we gonna get there. We're gonna get there.
Last question. You faced a lot of quarterbacks in your time in the NFL. What have you seen out of the three guys that you guys have been rolling out? Just what they've been able to do with such a loaded defense.
I've been going with Trubisky a lot. So, and I know he's a vet quarterback, so you can't really steal as much stuff as you want because he's a vet. He know where he's dropping. He know everything. So that comes with me and TE in the back right now. So now we got to disguise a lot. Come from different routes and stuff. So,
gotcha.
So there you heard Moats Kazee talking about Terrell Austin wants him to play in the box, but also wants him to play deep. He wants this group to be completely versatile. And you could look at a group of 4 safeties. You were just talking a quartet of safeties that this could give them an extremely deep look for their defense and their especially their secondary. I know this could be saying a lot, but I want to ask you, with the way that they look, is it possible the Steelers could have the best safety group in the NFL when you look at a group that's as versatile as this?
No, they're definitely in the conversation. When you talk about the high-end talent, you have a Minkah Fitzpatrick. So that puts you in a conversation with every Derwin James, every Jesse Bates, every Harrison Smith that is out there.
Yeah.
But then you also have, like you said, a Terrell Edmunds, who now when you're looking at him and you're comparing him to some of those other guys running mates, you're like, okay, now we got a legit conversation here. But then when you're talking about Damontae Kazee, who's led the NFL in interceptions.
Yes, he has.
Let's remember that. Led the NFL. Not a lot of people have that on their resume. And for us, obviously, we're extremely high on Trey Norwood, and rightfully so. But even when we're talking about the fourth safety on some of these other teams, they are not having a Trey Norwood type player there, or a player that they feel as excited about as we currently do. So, yeah, I do think the Steelers are going to be in that conversation, but this is on paper right now, and that's the other part of it, right? And I think that's what Damontae was ultimately alluding to right there when he said that there's still plenty that they want to improve upon, still plenty they want to critique and correct, because right now, yes, we have a group that looks like they're going to be able to do some things that is going to really help this defense out going forward. But we know the execution, it has to be there. The productivity has to be there. We only like these players when they can actually produce and live up to their full potential. And when that happens to slip at times, whether it's because of injuries, lack of motivation, whatever is going on, that could change it in a sense. So hopefully in this case, these four guys actually do live up to the potential that they have, because right now they are in every conversation that you're going to have in terms of best safety groups.
That's where I'm at is right now, is that it's very rare to have a safety pair that with two elite guys, but the teams that have the elite safety, the best pairs are usually a good role player next to the elite player. And I think that's what the Steelers have, is they have that elite player. But the thing is, I think they've got three of those role guys. That's why I say that they're in this conversation. They still have a lot to prove. They got to play it. They got to play games before we start putting them in that conversation. But preseason talk, I think that's one of the more underrated parts of this team. Now, before we roll, I want to preface this, because I see y'all in the comments section. Don't think I don't see y'all complaining when I do stuff. I saw people complain, why are we talking about Devin Bush all the time? Well, he's making news, people, and he's an important part of this team. Whether he's bad or good, it's going to be a big story for this team. So I know the last two episodes I've talked about Devin Bush, but we're doing it again. Why? Because Brian Flores went on the 93.7 The Fan on Wednesday and addressed the situation. When asked about Devin Bush, Moats is cracking up over here because he knows I don't tolerate the foolishness. But Brian Flores on 93.7 The Fan said about Devin Bush, Andrew Filipponi tweeted this: "I'm happy with where he is. He's making those unsung plays." Moats, is that Brian Flores covering for Devin Bush, or are there some unsung plays that I just ain't seeing here?
I think we both know.
Okay.
That, Brian Flores, and we've had the opportunity to meet him. Obviously, you talked to him as well as I have. We know that this is a man that, he has integrity. And we also understand that he is a man that isn't afraid to call things how he sees them. But we also have to remember this. When you're talking about dealing with certain individuals, certain players, publicly what you say to them versus privately what you say to them, sometimes it does have to be different. And I think in this instance, this is one of those. We know some of the knocks on Devin Bush, not just as a player, but some of the bigger knocks have been about his mentality. Is he mature enough for this profession? Is he mature enough to be a leader on this defense? Some of the things that we've seen him post at times on social media or reshare, it's questionable. And you just ask yourself, man, like, what's going on with him? And when you hear his responses at time, it really seems out of touch, out of tune. Obviously referring to the recent comments he made, and a whole host of other comments that he's made throughout his time here. But I think for Brian, I think he understands that if I publicly come out here and say, yes, I'm disappointed in the way Devin Bush has been playing, he has been lackluster, his effort wasn't good enough, the playmaking or the lack thereof on Saturday was too reminiscent of a year ago, man, we're over here thinking, should we go shopping? If he says that, we know that puts Devin Bush probably in a worse position than where he's currently at.
Yeah.
And where he's currently at isn't the best, just based on the lack of self-awareness in some of these instances. And in some cases, a little bit overconfidence when he's referencing the future in terms of his employment based on what he's been doing thus far. So with that, I just think that for Brian, he understands that, hey, I have to say certain things to help him out confidence-wise. I have to say certain things to keep him engaged to whatever capacity that is. And I think the biggest thing is for Brian is just trying to buy himself time, because as a coach or even as a teammate, you hope and you feel like, hey, man, with enough time, this switch is going to click. You know, he's getting there. And we'll see plays in practice. And we're like, oh, yeah, that feels good. And partly Brian Flores could be talking about unsung hero plays in practice. We used to do the same thing with Jarvis Jones. Jarvis would make plays in practice, and we'll be like, yo, Jarvis, man, I don't care what no one say. Like, we love what you're doing, bro. Like, you all right. But then you get in the game, and that productivity isn't there. It's like, regardless of what we are seeing personally, on Sundays when it matters, that play isn't being made. So when we would get up here and say, no, Jarvis isn't a bad player, Jarvis is a good player, Jarvis is doing this and this and this, well, it's practice. That's not the same. It's not weighted the same. And for Brian Flores, I think part of his response does have a little bit of that in there, because I'm sure if you go on a play in and play out basis in practice, like how these guys are doing in training camp, well, yeah, if you're taking 40 snaps a day and you're practicing every day a week, I'm sure you're going to have a handful of some good plays in there where you're going to feel confident. Hey, yeah, he's done some stuff. Yeah, we're all right. But when you turn the lights on Saturday in the game and you see what it's looking like, that's the disconnect. And that's the part where I'm sure Brian Flores and Devin Bush have had that heart-to-heart. They've had that conversation. They just don't want to have it be in a public thing, because clearly from Devin's angle, he already brings enough on himself. I'm sure Brian Flores doesn't want to add anything onto that man's plate right now.
No, I feel that entirely. I mean, that's something you don't see Tomlin do that too often, unless like he feels like it's necessary for a specific player. He doesn't chew them out, but he chews them out in private, and we know he does because players have talked about it. Heck, if you were at the first day of pads a couple weeks ago when Devin Bush lost the backs on backers drill, Brian Flores was up in his face and was challenging him. But you're right. Why does he need to go to the press and say those things unless he knows Devin Bush is a guy that's going to hear that and say, you know, is going to take that in a certain way? That's where coaching comes in, managing players, not just on the field and telling them concepts and schemes and things like that, but also managing like their personalities, knowing how they respond to different things. We'll see how Devin Bush responds to the challenges that have been getting posed. I'm very intrigued to see how that plays out. Last thing on Devin Bush before we move on to some offense talk with you, Moats. Do you think Devin Bush turns it around this year, or is this just who he's going to be for one more year and then he's gone? Tough question.
We'll put it like this, man. The bias alumni, Homer, five brethren, you know, like in that element, yes, because it's blind faith. That's essentially what it is. It's just the hope that, hey, man, the Steelers are going to get this thing right. The potential that we saw in him coming out of Michigan, that same guy that was stumping on logos, and we was all excited about that. The Homer in me, the biasness in me, the heavy 5'5" love is saying yes. But in reality, if he was any other player on any other team wearing any other jersey, the answer would be absolutely not, because I'm under the belief that after 3 seasons, you know exactly who a player is. A lot of guys, when you talk about the history of the NFL, you're not going to find a ton of dudes that, oh, it just magically clicked in year 4 and they just became this world beater player. Nah, injury or not, a lot of times you already know who these players are after that 3rd season. Now, we can try to dress it up and make whatever excuses we want in certain situations to fit whatever narrative we want, but we know who are the players and who aren't the players, and it's not something that is like very difficult to see in that capacity. So for me, if I'm not talking about a Steeler, then it's like, no, I'm ready to move on from him. But I was already feeling like that towards the end of last year, and that's why for me it would have been a different, you know, way of handling this offseason. But since I'm being biased and I'm being a homer, I'm going to say and end it with yes. Yes, he can. Yep.
Look at you. Hey, but at least you can admit it. The people who do, like that's the thing. He's like, hey, I'm letting you know I'm a homer and I'm proud. So there's that. We got to take another quick break. When we come back, I want to get Moats' interpretation of the QB battle right now, especially with Kenny Pickett. Does he surpass Mason Rudolph? Has he surpassed Mason Rudolph? We've been seeing him work his way up to getting more reps, and Mike Tomlin also said he'd get a higher level of reps in this upcoming preseason game against the Jaguars. We'll do that in just a second here. But first, we got to give you guys a message from one of our sponsors, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. You're hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks. A few becomes a few too many. As the evening comes to an end, people start to head out and you think of calling for a ride. But no, you live nearby. You can make it home, okay? It's no big deal. What are the odds you'll get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, You lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone. Everyone knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So, if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe, plan ahead, and get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. And we're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. He's Arthur Moats. After the most serious ad read I've ever done in my life.
I was like, man, dude.
I'm delivering the drama here. Listen, hey, but drunk driving serious, man. I've been hit by a drunk driver. I literally got hit and flipped.
I've been hit by a drunk driver as well. Absolutely.
Okay. Listen, let me tell you. I got hit by a drunk driver. I was walking across a crosswalk. I flipped over the car. I got up. My adrenaline was kicking in. I didn't understand that adrenaline was kicking in. And I was like, yo, I just took a car. I could have been in the NFL.
Yeah.
Ray Lewis, Aaron Donald, no problem. About 15 minutes later, I was like, my body. So I was like, I couldn't go to the NFL. So I was, I learned quickly what adrenaline was like there. But in all seriousness, drunk driving is a serious problem. Don't do it. And you can actually save your life and someone else's. But Moats, I want to get your thoughts on Kenny Pickett, what you've seen so far. Everyone was really hyped on him. I've talked a lot about him on this show this week, rightfully so. Guy threw 2 touchdowns, a game winner, looked really sharp in that first preseason game. But this week, we've seen him run with the 2s. We've seen him run with the 1s now. Mike Tomlin's giving him more chances. What is your interpretation of how Kenny Pickett is taking on this week's challenge of getting more opportunities after his early success?
Yeah, I think Kenny's been doing an awesome job, man, with this whole process. I know we're going to focus on the recency element of it, but I want to rewind the clock a little bit, man. You talked about his progression through OTAs.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about how we would see him just starting to be more comfortable, just, more familiar with everything. You see him in minicamp, the improvement. Then you talk about the first week of training camp, and it was like, okay, we can see a little bit, but it's not there just yet. About the midway point of that second week, we all started to say, hey, he's putting together some practices now. We're starting to look good. And then obviously you see the next step, right? What does he do in the game? He puts it on tape in stadium. Now you're talking about him getting this upgrade in terms of running, not just with the 2s, but even getting reps with the 1 unit in 2-minute drill, which is a very significant portion of practice. When you talk about the 2-minute drill in the sense of what it represents, end of the half, end of the game, points matter during that time. You're not wasting time giving reps to anybody out there. And you look at the other names of the players that were on the field offensively and defensively, that'll also remind you of the sincerity and the severity of that particular drill. So for Kenny to get those reps, it matters. But the thing for me that I've been enjoying with Kenny is every time the team gives him a little bit more, a little bit bigger test, he's been passing it. You talk about, all right, get you some reps with the 2s. What does that look like? You talk about now, get some reps with the 1s. What is that looking like? And we're just seeing this natural progression. And I think that is also doing something good, not just for Coach Tomlin, but also for the players here. Because obviously for Coach Tomlin, he's having to handle Kenny a little bit with kid gloves because he's the prized possession, but he plays one of the most difficult positions to play.
Yep.
So even though you have this crazy momentum behind him, pushing him out there, it's like for Coach Tom, he's having to say, pump the brakes. I'm easing this guy into this because everybody wants him to be QB1 the day we drafted him. We get it. But there is a process, and Coach Tomlin understands it. But more importantly, Coach Tomlin understands his players and the veterans. You lose veterans when you give first-round draft picks starting spots before they earn it.
Yep.
Because as a veteran, we do not care about where a guy was drafted. To us, that's all privilege.
Right.
So for you to draft a guy in the first, and then he's going to say, come in here and get this starting spot, you're like, no, you're not. These reps aren't just given out. You got to earn this. It's not pickup basketball. You can't just say, I got next. No, that's not how this works. And why you think a guy like Chris Oladukin has just now got reps at quarterback? You don't just get those things handed up because you're on this roster. And Coach Tomlin understands that. So if he would have just been throwing Kenny out there with the ones, and Kenny would have been out there looking unprepared or looking like a guy that needed to develop and take some time through the spring and stuff like that, you lose veterans because your veterans are looking at that player saying, no, I'm not giving him the benefit of the doubt because he hasn't earned it just yet. It's not justified. But now when you talk about the way that Kenny's been progressing through this thing, if Kenny has a bad game on Saturday, it's not the end of the world. You know why? Because we can say, hey, man, we've seen him put together a nice little clip of positivity right now in stadium and in practice. So as a player, you believe in that more, you trust it more, and you rally behind that. Whereas if you just throw him out there simply because he played at Pitt and he's the 20th overall selection, it don't work like that. And that could be the issue. So for me, man, as a whole, I'm enjoying what Kenny's doing. I think that is deserved now for him to get those reps. And I think for Coach Tomlin, man, he's chomping at the bit because if Kenny can put together another solid performance this weekend, now that third preseason game becomes interesting for us.
It does. And it puts a serious question. It's like, okay, does he run with the twos again? Because Mike Tomlin has said he wants to give everyone a shot to work with everybody. He wanted to give Mitch a shot with the ones, Mason a shot with the ones, Kenny a shot with the twos, and I guess Kenny's getting a little bit shot at the ones. Now you're saying, though, because like we've all, at least people that have been there, we've all kind of assumed that this is Mitch's job and Kenny's just working to kind of see if he can surpass Mason. There's people in the national media that think that Kenny's going to surpass Mitch. And I still think that that's just not going to happen unless Mitch gets hurt or completely bombs at some point. And the Steelers are like, well, the rookie can't be any worse. But are there things that you're looking for from Kenny Pickett that's going to be like, hey, this guy has accelerated much faster than we predicted? Because, again, and I've said this all along, Kenny Pickett, like you talked about that progress. That's what he did in college. Every lesson he took to heart. He worked on it. He eliminated a weakness, kept moving forward, and that made him the more complete quarterback when he got to the end of his collegiate career. Now he's taking those skills and applying them in the NFL, and we're already seeing steady growth moving forward. Not all the way up and down, not a roller coaster of a training camp, but more of a steady climb of he'll hit a hitch on a certain day, but on the next day he's still trending upwards. What do you need to see from Kenny in this next preseason game to show that he's still on that climb?
Yeah, more of the productivity that we saw, not just in the game on Saturday, but what he's been doing in the week. You think about the 2-minute drill. He has a nice shot to George Pickens. It was like 20, 30-yard pass, whatever. Just stretching the field more. We know what he's capable of from an arm talent standpoint. And we really didn't see a ton of that on Saturday just based on what Matt Canada was calling. I think when he goes out there on Saturday, though, and now he's going to get some more complex schemes. He's going to get exposed a little bit more to some potential negativity. I think in that realm right there, if he can go out there and still look confident, still look like he's in command of this offense and just looking like he believes in himself, I think those are some of the things that you need to see. Those are some of the things that I want to see because now he'll be with that more legitimate group. Because in the first preseason game, I mean, we talked about it and obviously we respected some of the things that he did, but that's a glorified college all-star game with the units that he was out there playing in. And that's no disrespect to those guys, but that's just the reality of it. I mean, when you talk about the NFL, it's the reason why it's the best of the best, So in that capacity, it was impressive. But now let's see what you do when you're playing against some guys that are going to actually be legit NFL players. That's the part where we'll get to know a little bit more about Kenny. But as long as he can go out there and still just look confident, look the part, I think that he's very much in this conversation. I think more pressure goes towards Mitch Trubisky right now because you remember this. In that first game, Mitch had 2 series. First one being a touchdown. Not a lot of pressure on that situation after that, right? Kenny was out there for 5 series. So you could see how he had to actually expose himself a little bit more. He took a little bit more adversity. He had some bad and he had some really good. Well, Mitch, I anticipate having a lot more than just 2 series. I think he's going to have to show that he can do more than just have a nice opening drive. He's going to also need to put together multiple drives where you see the offense moving, looking competent, him more importantly looking like QB1. That's the part for me where I think of how Kenny continues to move up this ladder. I think of a Mac Jones situation. I think of how Cam Newton initially, that was his spot. That was his job. He got hurt. Mac Jones goes out there and lights it up in that preseason game, and then we saw how it ended up there. When I look at Kenny, I say, okay, Mitch is not the injury part, but if Mitch is average and Kenny is electric, that's going to be a win for Kenny. That's going to have this team saying to themselves, is it close? And we know how Coach Tomlin feels, baby. If it's close, he's going with the young guy. And why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? I mean, Mitch, the money isn't astronomical where you can't have him as your backup.
Right.
And he's not proven enough in this league to the point where he's above reproach. So if it's close in any capacity, you say go ahead and get this young guy out there, because I have more to gain with him being out there than per se a Mitch being out there if it's close. And that's just how I think it's going to play out, man. But to me, I think a lot of this pressure goes to Mitch Trubisky right now if he wants to still be QB1.
So you're saying that this QB1 race isn't a locked deal right now?
Yeah, I don't think it's a locked deal because of what Kenny was able to do on Saturday, along with Coach Tomlin's response to that. If Coach Tomlin didn't respond by putting him out there with the twos more, essentially flipping him and Mason Rudolph, if they weren't giving Kenny one's reps, then I wouldn't look into it at all. But Coach Tomlin, he leaves tea leaves out there. And when he's giving those guys reps, he is not wasting reps. He is not a waste rep guy. You know, you got some of these coaches, oh, yeah, man, just throw whoever out there. No. You have to earn the right to be out there with some of them guys. So with that, when you hear, oh, yeah, he's getting those guys his reps, he's evaluating Kenny. He wants to see, what does Kenny look like? How does Kenny respond to this? How do the guys around him respond? And then also he's looking at Mitch and he's looking at Mason. Mason, how are you responding with the threes right now? Hey, Mitch, young boys on your back. How you feeling? How you gonna respond? Are you gonna get tight? Or are you gonna ultimately be able to go out there and say, hey man, I'm QB1. I don't care who's behind me. That's all a part of this evaluation as well. That's the part that doesn't get talked about, but that is very much in play right now as well.
Man, that makes this a lot more fun right now. And you think that the one spots, I've been operating under the assumption that this is just a done deal. Like, you know, it was going to be Mitch at the ones, and then Kenny or Mason at the two, and then we'll see how that plays out. But I'm very intrigued to see, does Kenny make a push for the ones? Do we see that, you know, come to fruition in the second preseason game? We fully expect Mitch to play a lot more snaps in this preseason game, along with a lot of the other Steelers starters. This is their chance to kind of get a full tune-up before the regular season. But then we'll probably see Kenny Pickett running with the second team. We'll see how much he gets done there, and maybe, who knows? Maybe Arthur Moats is right, and you see Mitch Trubisky starting to sweat and Kenny Pickett starting to thrive. What conversations does that start in Pittsburgh? We'll get into that then. We'll do a full breakdown and preview of that game, getting you ready with the final storylines to watch for the Steelers' second preseason game against the Jacksonville Jaguars on the road for the Friday episode. We hope to have Jenna Harner of Channel 11 WPXI on with us. Her schedule is always busy, but we're hoping that we can work it out schedule-wise. Most, thanks so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Man, first off, you know it's always love being up here with you, man. Can never get enough of that, man. Salute you and what you doing, man. Love your movement, baby. Love the movement. Migos, you know how we ride. But yeah, man, on social media at TheBody52. Find me verified on all my accounts on all the channels. And then more importantly, any of my media work is on YouTube. Just type in my name. You'll go to the page. You'll see all the work right there, baby.
Absolutely. Do check Arthur out. He does stuff all the time, every day. It's amazing content. He is extremely knowledgeable. He's Steelers alum. That's why we love to have him on Locked On Steelers. Thanks again, Moats, for coming on the show. Thank you, dear listeners and viewers, for checking us out. Remember, we're on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, YouTube. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes. Also, if you're enjoying the show, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Music. If you do that with a positive comment, you get a special shout out at the end of the show. Thanks again, everyone. Be back on your screen and in your ears Friday.